Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today, we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the Arena ladder. This particular video is for traditional, standard, best of 3. If you're looking for best of 1 standard or the other formats, Explorer, Historic, whatever it may be, check out the playlist. The most recent videos will all be curated there. As always, we get the data from what you see on screen from Untapped.gg, companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client, tracks your win rates, loss rates, deck collections, in-game overlays, whole bunch of cool functionality and features. So check that out. A link is in the video description if you want to get started for free with a bunch of the features, as well as I'll post all these deck lists within the video description if you want to port them over to Arena and get started on the ladder. So we are looking standard best of 3, as I mentioned, January 9th through to the 16th. Platinum to Mythic Rank, 13,000 matches, so 26 to 39,000 games of Magic played because it's best of 3. And as pretty much always the last month and a half, we got Grixis, Wet Rakdos, if you may. Mid-range as the top deck in standard, 61%. This deck has peaked as high as like 70% in past weeks. And this is pretty much like all the bangers in standard. You got Fable the Mirror Breaker, Shieldred, Invoke Despair on the top end. Corpse Praiser for card advantage, Blood Tithe High restores removal. Both play really nicely with the flipped Fable, the Mirror Breaker. A bunch of removal in the form of Cut Down, Abrades, Go for the Throats, Make the Spear. Now, notably, this deck was pretty weak to the Izzet ramp decks that we saw for a couple weeks, but we've seen now since that the Grixis decks have adapted by putting a Braid main board, and it's really shored up that matchup. And we see them kind of back to the top, and we'll cover it, but Izzet Tempo's had quite the drop since past weeks. Make the Spear as counter, Bankbuster for card advantage, kind of all mixed in. Your sideboard, as always, we'll kind of go through and suggest where you'd want to kind of bring these in for. So Cut Downs, Go for the Throats, Obliterating Bolts, Parasitic Grasp, Brotherhood's End are all kind of removal for the heavier aggressive decks. Parasitic Grasp hits pretty much everything for 2 mana in the Soldiers decks, also some life gain against some more of the aggressive decks. So just a smattering of removal, especially for go-wide strategies. There's a lot of 1-for-1 removal in the main board, but again, something that goes wide. This is an answer for stuff like that. Duress is kind of for the mirror, along with negates, kind of the bigger mana. Siphon Insight helps bridge the mirror matches, just give you kind of consistency in hitting your line drops, lets you play draw go, and then also steal their best cards. Liliana is also for kind of the mirror, the slower mid-range decks where you can kind of attack their hand as well. A lot of these effects don't hit planeswalkers, so Liliana, unless they have a creature on board, you can generally just keep plussing and using this. Blade Coil, probably the mirror, I would imagine, and then just kind of like the longer value games. The longer the game goes, the more mana you have, the more you can pump into Blade Coil Serpent and get more value out of it that way there. The next most winningest deck is Azorious Soldiers, similar, actually same rate, 60.7. So we're going to the 100th of a percentage here to kind of differentiate, but this is another deck where we're seeing a tribal deck leveraging a bunch of soldiers. Notably, we don't have anything past the 3-drop slot, and this one also doesn't have Brutal Cathar in the main. So this version here, it's a little bit more low to the ground, taking advantage of Harbin's ability. You have Denick for lifelink, also 2 bodies in 1. Slip Out the Back is an interesting one for kind of a protection effect that we don't usually see in this type of deck. By going with the Azorious colors versus the mono white version, you get access to Fortified Beachhead. This version is also on Mishra's Foundry, so just a lot of utility lands in the mana base. Some really nice fixing as well between all the dual lands, Secluded Courtyard, all that. Thalia for kind of taxing effects, and then this is your card advantage engine. Sideboard just has more disruption for the bigger mana decks, Spell Pierce, Protective Negotiators in there. You have Brutal Cathar for kind of removal. Extraction Specialist is good against the Grixis decks, stuff like that, where they're bringing in a lot of targeted removal. You can kind of rebuy some of your effects. And then Lauren of the Third Path against any of the heavy artifact enchantment decks. These tempo decks, hitting Fables, stuff like that. Wedding Announcement decks, kind of mixed into there. Then we go to Izzet Tempo. Oh, yeah, I covered the sideboard. Izzet Tempo. So I just want to kind of highlight, like, this deck's dropped off a lot. It was closer to 60% in past weeks, but the meta's kind of adapted to it. It gets hit by a lot of the bigger kind of counter spells like Disdainful Strokes, stuff like that. Lauren's being in there, Braids, just your cheaper answers to these bigger threats. And this deck does take a little bit of time to get going. You really want to curve out with, an answer on 2, Fable or Stern Lesson into Mightstone into one of these big threats. But the core of the deck is using Power Stones to get ahead in terms of mana, along with Mightstone, Weakstone to cast one of these big kind of prototype titans, kind of in a way of the artifact deck. Your sideboard, you have like Disruption and counter spells. You have some early removal, Graveyard Hate, a Sweeper against the aggressive decks. You have Thran Spider. This also can provide some card advantage, and then Saheeli for the grindier matchups as well to provide you some card advantage in kind of like an alternate win condition. These get hit by like Essence Scatter, for example, where this wouldn't. They all kind of get hit by a Disdainful Stroke as well. And then we actually had the pizza box open this weekend, so I'm going to have top 8 coverage on my channel if you want to see the top 8 of this being played out. But this happened on Sunday. Hollywood Pizza hosts 3 times a month. So this was the standard version of the tournament, $250 cash. There was 124 players in this one that played. So I'll list all these lists here. Saw Soldiers do fairly well. I'm not going to go for spoilers in terms of who won, but the top 8 was Soldiers, a couple mono black decks, an Esper midrange, Mardu Angels, and mono red, kind of mixed into there. But we had a lot of different decks here. You can check them all out. In terms of like distribution, Grixis midrange was the most represented, had a sub 50%. So it's interesting to see how the meta kind of adapted here, where on the ladder we're getting 60% win rate, and in this tournament setting, 43%. Notably, this is an open deck list tournament as well. So we saw that. Azorious Soldiers had a good matchup, 57%. Mono Red had a good showing, 67%, kind of mixed into there. And then so you can see all this. All the deck lists are shared here. You can access them all. I'll link that here. You are interested in playing in one of these tournaments. They're free to play on MTG Melee through your Arena account. So you'd be able to play this. The next one coming up, I have all the lists in the video description as well if you're interested. The next one is Explore. I'll actually be commentating on that one there. So if you're interested in playing, sign up now. It's Explorer format. If you're looking for standard, there'll be some more events in February as well. And these are all cash tournaments as well. So if you do well, you win some cash by playing Arena. So in any case, going to wrap this one up. As always, if you can, drop a like, comment, and subscribe. The goal, we hit 7,000 subs on the channel. My goal is to hit 10,000 by June. So if you haven't done so already, make sure to sub. We come out with multiple videos a week to explain what's happening in the world of Arena in terms of the hottest new decks, what's best on the ladder, what can get you to the next elevated level, and kind of any tournaments or stuff like that as well. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.